Hey guys, welcome back for the Warehouse Podcast, episode 13, lucky number 13. He's smiling like a possum eating chokeberries over here today because we've got Ronnie from Joy Electric joining us.
That sounded pretty happy though.
Hey,
you were like, kind of like, hey, cats and kittens,
yeah.
kind of thing. Like,
well, yeah, because he's like cats and
like
kittens.
Like we're having like a 50s dance party or something.
I mean, kind of in a way, like Joy Electric was all about unicorns and...
Yeah, like lollipops and stuff.
Yeah, like, you know, just trying to be upbeat for once. Tim, I can't win for losing with this guy.
I know. I'm just excited about this period, and this one's good. I literally, when we were off after we just finished it, I was like, this is the most tooth and nail-y interview of the tooth and nail stuff we've done, and like I'm just happy with everything.
And he broke the rule. Like I think the podcast rule and the shirt rule goes the same as like if you're at a show, like you're not supposed to wear the band shirt to the show.
Is it a faux pas, you think?
I think so.
Yeah, but there's some bands that, like, if I was going to see Elvis, I'd do that because I love him so much. You know what I mean?
Are you going to go
like,
see the Elvis movie?
Oh, yeah.
Are you?
Yeah. I hear it's really good. And, you know, it's not like he hasn't been portrayed like 19 times so far. And so I hear this is the best of the 19 or whatever.
Nice. My dad one time drug us to Branson, Missouri, and we had to go to, like, downtown Branson, like old Branson.
I went to that. I know exactly what you're talking
yeah.
about. And the guy, like, gave out, like, handkerchiefs and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was badass.
Yeah, and, like, he like, did this, like, weird thing where he also did Liberace. I thought his Liberace was better than Elvis, to be honest, because he cracked a really good summer.
There's not enough Liberace impersonators, I
There's
think.
not. No. We need that more, I think.
So with that said,
yeah.
Ronnie Martin.
Here we go.
You guys, we are here with Ronnie Martin of Joy Electric. Oh my god. I know, I keep saying I'm fanboying all over again. If you're not familiar with Joy Electric, then I guess you probably wouldn't be listening to this because you wouldn't be familiar with the Warehouse, but
right.
Ronnie Martin, ground level, tooth and nail, involved in everything, brother to Jason Martin, you know, partner to you know, just great stuff. So welcome, Ronnie.
Thanks for having me.
So what's going on today in Ronnie Martin land?
Oh man, that's a very broad question. Gosh. Well, for the purposes of this podcast, I put out a new record in January under my name, first time under just the Ronnie Martin name, and I'm working on all kinds of stuff to follow up with that. Christmas album coming out in the fall, and
second Christmas album.
Yeah, for sure. So it's been a while, and I love Christmas, and I'm really excited about it. So.
Not that everything doesn't go with Joy Electric, but what was more Joy Electric than Christmas? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean that, you know, yeah, and that's, you can definitely draw that out from, you know, just sort of the general sound and feel of Joy-E, but I just love Christmas, so I'm just a big Christmas, you know, aficionado. So.
Well, and I have not heard the new record yet, as you're still making it, but like I have heard the first one, and I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that's palatable in the record. I mean, I think you can tell, like, it feels like this is somebody that's into this and like appreciates it.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate that.
What songs are on the new one, if you can say?
On the Christmas album?
Yeah.
Well, so I did something that I did something that I was always against in the old days. And I've been writing a lot of Christmas songs over the years. So I decided I'm going to put out 3 Christmas albums over the next 3 years. But I decided that the first one should be all brand new original Christmas tunes. So,
oh, nice.
I could tell you what they're called, but that would mean nothing to you.
I was expecting you to do something from side 2 of the Rudolph soundtrack or something like that.
That is coming, and then I'm gonna do kind of a Christmas classics album, you know, with songs like that.
Yeah. And
then I'm gonna do a Christmas hymns album, with
nice,
just more hymn-like songs. So yeah.
What about like a 4th album of all the Mariah Carey Christmas songs that aren't All I Want for Christmas Is You? Like the ones we missed out.
Did you actually record a Christmas song that wasn't All I Want for Christmas Is You?
Well, she did the whole Christmas album, but we only know the one song. Like, I can't tell you another song that was on the Mariah Carey Christmas album, but Joy Electric could cover the other Mariah Carey Christmas songs.
I mean, that's always an option for sure.
I mean, yeah, and get Dolly on one. You know?
Yeah.
Dolly does the Christmas albums.
Hey, and they're good too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I am enthusiastically looking forward to this. So, with all that said, I want to kind of start at the beginning, Ronnie. So, I don't even know where. I mean, because to be honest, when I came into this, Joy Electric and Starflyer 59 were just towering figures, and I mean, certainly the first level, Tooth and Nail, that, in my opinion, in my own humble opinion, kind of set the tone for what Tooth and Nail would be known as, with a wide variety of stuff, coexisting with Strong Arm and, bands like that. So how did all this come about? I mean, like, how did Joy Electric even start? Like, I don't even know, because you were already a beast when I came into it.
Well, gosh, I don't know about that, but that's really kind that you say it like that. I think that was one of the strengths of Brandon Ebel as he was forming the label, is that he was really eclectic in his tastes. And so he wasn't somebody who just liked one style of music. He liked a lot of different styles of music. And if you know anything about Brandon, you know that he was really passionate about all of those styles of music. So I think that was really to the benefit of, Jason and I, because, we were doing something a little off center, and yet he loved it and he really supported it really well. And at the same time, we knew we weren't going to be his largest selling artists. That was just never going to be who we were, given the style of music we were doing. But he just supported us from the very beginning because he believed in it and he loved it. And so we were able to coexist with all kinds of different, all kinds of different artists, whether it was, Wish for Eden or Plank Eye or MXPX, or it was just this melting pot of bands, as you well know, in the very beginning. It was almost like you didn't even know what was coming because it was so all over the map in terms of musical styles. And it was just a really interesting time, for all of that, because you couldn't put your finger on any of it. And there was really something for everybody out there on the label. And so he just had a vision for what he wanted to do, and we fit in with that vision, and he supported it. So it was interesting. It was fun.
Well, how did you get brought to that party? Was it Jason first, or was it you, or what brought you guys to that?
Well, we had done some other records with Michael Mott. He had a label in the early 90s. My brother and I, we had done some projects with him. And then that label folded that we were on. And then I had met Brandon when he was working at a label called Frontline Records, and he knew about what the kind of work I did, and he was forming a label, and I was under contract still with another label, so I couldn't do anything. But my brother wasn't, and he was doing demos. And I said, "Hey, listen to my brother. Got to hear my brother's demos. I think you'll like it for your new label." I was kind of telling him about the sound and what kind of bands that he was influenced by. And Brandon was super intrigued. So I connected my brother and Brandon together. I gave Brandon my brother's demo tape, and it was a demo tape back in that day. And Brandon loved it, signed him. And then he came after me and he said, "Hey," he goes, "what's it going to take to get you on the roster?" And I said, "Well, I got to figure some things out." And I actually had another offer from another label, and I passed that up to go with Brandon because I just loved what he was doing. And so that's kind of how it came together.
Wow. So. I mean, and for me, I'm kind of laughing at this because, like, again, you guys were such a juggernaut. I mean, Starflyer, just incredible. Joy Electric. I mean, and I remember, like, getting the catalogs that would have, like, all the bands and just, like, oh my God, Joy Electric. Oh my God, Joe Christmas. Oh my God, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
So the thought of, like, this is starting out with, like, a tape and, like, just these little conversations. I mean, did he have an office yet, or was this still when he was famously in the apartment,
Yeah, so we were there when he had graduated from the apartment into, like a one office kind of complex. It was in Irvine, California. It was in a bigger complex, and he had one like a one room office. And and that's how it began. And then it just slowly, grew, and not really even that slowly. It was kind of a quick incline, right? And before you know it, he's moving back to Seattle, and that's where he really became established. And that's when everything sort of kind of kicked into high gear for him. So.
Wow. So what did you think of the first wave? I mean, all those bands that, again, wildly all across the map. But I mean, you covered like I'm Okay, You're Okay. You know what I mean? Like, you guys were always so support. One of my favorite Joy Electric things, and I couldn't tell you which one it was, but one of the songs from the Penalty Box, like on the inside of it, Roy from Zayo was like going crazy doing Roy's stuff. Wait, did I just say that right? The guitar player. Am I thinking? Well, anyway, and he's wearing a Joy Electric shirt. And I thought, like, that is so badass that, like, this heaviest of the heavy band is representing for this keyboard dancey kind of thing. And, like, I just thought it was amazing. But so you were in the middle of all that, right? What did you think of, like, the diversity and everything? I mean...
Well, I loved the diversity. We really struggled because in the early days, because there was a lot of different shows that were going on that would showcase all the variety. And we had a hard time getting invited to those things because we were so out there, with what we were doing. And you got to remember, this is 1994. I mean, this is the height of, Pearl Jam. And like what we were doing couldn't have been more like out of fashion, And so it was difficult actually, because there'd be these showcases, in these local showcases where you would have my brother and, Plank Guy, these bands, and we'd be like, I'd be over here going, hey, can we play? And it was like, oh, well no. I mean, it's too weird. What you guys are doing is too weird. It's like, no, I know, but it's supposed to be weird. And, let the weird guy into the picture, into the club. And so it took a little while before we started getting support from people like Mike Herrera and from, Zayo and bands that, like artists themselves that had more eclectic tastes. So when you talk to like Jesse from Zayo, he would come up to me at a festival and he would say, man, I'm digging what you guys are doing. I'm looking at him and there's a part of me that's thinking, I don't know if he's making fun of me right now or if he's playing a joke, And he goes, no. He goes, I don't even really listen to much hardcore. I play it, I write it. He goes, that's not what I listen to at all. He goes, I'm listening to Depeche Mode. I'm listening to you. He goes, I listen to all this other stuff. He goes, so I just wanted to say that I'm a fan. I love it. And I'm going, okay, well so that's when things started kind of widening out for us a little bit. It wasn't so like, I think when people first encountered us on the label, they just didn't know what to do with it. And I liked that because it made us stick out a little bit, but it also prevented us from, we were sort of like the kid in the corner the little brother that nobody wanted to come in and play with all the big kids, So it was a little bit like that, but
I want to say first, I looked it up. I was thinking of Roy Culver, Russ Cogdell. It was Russ, not Roy. That's what it was. So Russ wearing the Joy Electric thing.
Okay.
But Ronnie, that was something that I felt like, in my opinion, not that I needed to be pushed over a cliff with Joy Electric because I like the records and I like what you're doing, but like, you were just in at 110%, period. I mean, there were times that I saw Joy Electric in front of, a crowd that was there to see something crazy, and I was like, God, these guys are going to, like, riot or something. And, I mean, you came on, like, 150%, and it didn't matter. I mean, it was like, I heard that said of Henry Rollins. They were like, with Henry Rollins, it doesn't matter how into it the crowd is, it matters how into it Henry is. And I would say the same thing about Ronnie Martin. Like, it seemed like what you just said wasn't palatable from outside. I mean, that like, we're the kid in the corner struggling. It was like, I wouldn't know that to see you on stage because you went for it, period. I mean, was that a conscious thing? I mean, were you like, we are struggling, it's hard, it's easier for MXPX or whatever. I mean, was that part of it, or is that just how you did things?
I mean, I think it was just about, I was really devoted to what we were doing, and I loved it. And I, just like anybody else that loved, what they were doing, I was just going to give it my all. And I wanted people to see, that, music can coexist, so, I'm an 80s kid. I grew up in the 80s, and music was all over the map. You didn't just like one thing. And I feel like in the 90s, things really narrowed down to where it was like, no, I like this genre of music, and I don't really move beyond the four walls of that particular genre. And we just kind of came out in the height of that a little bit. And so I think for us, when we were on bills where it didn't make any sense, and there's all these other bands that really had nothing to do with us in terms of what they sounded like, I think it was like, hey, let's just show them that we can get out there and try to put on a good show and do our best and be entertaining. And so it was like a little bit of an uphill climb. And I think it was almost like we had to prove ourselves. And, and besides that, we just enjoyed the environment. I enjoyed the environment, playing shows, being in that whole scene. It was just enjoyable. And so I just wanted people to know that, hey, I mean, we're doing something a little left of center, but what does that have to do with anything? If anything, it just makes the whole thing just richer and better. We can all enjoy different types of stuff here. So, yeah.
I always thought it made it more interesting because, like, I really don't want people. I don't want to do what people think I'm going to do.
Right.
I mean, the notion of like Zayo and Joy, like that doesn't really make sense. Which that is what draws me more to it. Did you, well, pursuant to what I just said, I mean, did you get shit? I mean, did people Tim told me one time that like people at the warehouse even were like yelling crap at you and stuff, and I don't know what the bill was. It was before I was there. But I mean, did people who came to see Strong Arm or something like that, like, were they giving you crap or?
Yeah, I think in the early days there was sort of like a chuckle, a wink, a nod kind of a thing, like this, like we're here to see the real bands, the real music. And, we'd come up on the bill, and, there'd be a little bit of that, like, kind of smirky, kind of response to us. And I think that just fueled us a little bit more to just keep doing what we're doing and not change, just keep kind of doubling down, doing what we're doing. And, I was really devoted to the craft of what we were doing, the sound of what we were doing, to progress. And then all of that really changed a few years in, when we put out Robot Rock, and those records started selling more and doing a lot better. And we gained a little more wide acceptance. And that's because music was changing too. As we got into the mid to the late 90s, there were more eclectic, styles on the radio, and stuff was kind of coming in. And so it just wasn't we weren't seen as being, quite as out there as we were in the very beginning. And people were getting used to us because, we were playing all the same shows, all the same venues, all the same festivals. And it was almost like you couldn't get rid of us. We were working just as hard as everybody else. And, if you can't beat them, join them, a little bit is what it was. And so I think people that were sort of shocked and didn't know what to do with the sound when they first heard it, they grew to either tolerate it, or they grew to actually really like it and become fans. So it was a really strange evolution, I think, in some ways.
Me personally as a fan, I remember when Robot Rock came out, and I mean, I definitely felt like, weren't you doing like analog stuff at that point? I mean, it seemed obvious to me at least that like, this guy's really trying to do something unique here. I mean, it seemed obvious. And I just thought that was a huge progression. Not that the rest wasn't good, but I just thought that was a big progression. And, Moog stuff and things of that nature. And like, I just felt like you were really pushing an envelope that nobody else was in the envelope.
Yeah, and that was the attempt, to get all these big, Moog, modular synths. And again, they were fashionable in certain circles, but not in the circles we were in. And we just loved it all. And so it was a way really to stick out, be unique, kind of own a particular genre within the scene that nobody else was stepping into. That was really fun. And I think once we got to that stage of the game, we were really having a good time. We were really enjoying it a lot more, because instead of promoters or festivals saying, well, okay, we'll put them on the bill. I mean, we were getting calls at that point, and people were inviting us in. So it just the tide had shifted quite a bit, and it was just. But those first few years were such a slog that by the time that happened, we were just really grateful for it. We were really appreciative of it, and it was fun. Yeah.
So what was those mid to later years with Tooth and Nail like? Because at the time that you're evolving, Tooth and Nail kind of was too. I mean, they were becoming like, MTV was starting to pay attention, and like Warped Tour was starting to become a thing and stuff like that. I mean, like, what was your relationship with all that kind of stuff?
Well, it's funny because right around Robot Rock is when we started getting a bunch of mainstream press, and we had, all kinds of different magazines that specialized in kind of what we did. Were paying us, were giving us some attention now, and Tooth and Nail was doing a good job of sort of crossing over, sort of out of just purely the kind of the gospel market into more of a mainstream market, or into more of like sort of the indie mainstream. And so we got to be kind of a part of that a little bit. So we got some really good reviews and some good attention, and we got some good opportunities to play like certain showcases and certain shows that really kind of highlighted what we did, and maybe some of the more unique aspects of what we did. They Brandon was, I think the unique thing that he was trying to do was he wanted to have one foot in both worlds. He knew who was buttering his bread. It was mainly the evangelical gospel market, but he also thought, music's music. There's no reason why we can't cross over into some of these into some of these mainstream markets. And so he was really pushing it at that time. And I think he did a really good job in terms of getting some of those artists out there. And we were able to cross over a little bit, our videos got some really good airplay at the time, like Monosynth. And so it was fun, especially for us, because we knew that we could find a larger audience in the mainstream than we probably ever would be able to in the Christian market. And so it was fun to kind of start, getting a little bit more attention on that side of things. But yeah, Tooth and Nail was really serious about that. They were making a really, really heavy effort to do that. And again, with some of their artists, obviously it really, really worked. They really did well.
Well, and it's funny that this got brought up, but right before you called in, our boy Chase here is thinking about putting on a church show, and we were talking about like bands that would actually play a church and wouldn't play a church and stuff. Yeah. Which was obviously in the Warehouse days that got discussed a lot. So I'm asking you right now, like, what was your take on, playing a place like the Warehouse and then playing at somebody's youth group or something, and like, because Chase needs the insight for his show.
No, I loved it. I didn't make any distinction. I thought it was a little disingenuous for bands to make the distinction. So, I thought, look, if you have a problem playing, youth oriented shows, or, shows that are attached to, a Christian organization or a church, it seemed a little weird to complain about it and then do it. So it was like, if you didn't enjoy it, nobody's making you do this. You should probably just pursue other avenues. To us, to my brother and I'll speak for both of us. People that enjoyed our music were people who enjoyed the music. I mean, the venue wasn't really a big issue for us, and we played every kind of venue imaginable. And so I liked the variety of it. We'd play clubs when we were in like doing inner city stuff, urban, and we play, kind of youth oriented, church driven, kind of venues when we were on the outskirts of town. And it was just, we just didn't even blink an eye. We loved it all, we just enjoyed playing and enjoyed connecting with people. And so we really tried not to be snobby about it, I think is what I'm trying to say. We just didn't want to be snobby about it. But.
See, when I would play shows like in the bands that I was with, I was more concerned for the youth pastor. Like when it would be like a youth group show, I wasn't so concerned with, I'm playing at a church. I'm just like, man, I hope I don't lose this guy his job. Like, yeah. And so every once in a while, especially if there's like some old people that would show, be like, we're here to support the youth. And I'm like, man, I really wish you'd be at home, because when you see these kids go wild or these kids do something, like, I don't want it to fall back on that guy. And like, there was a lot of youth pastors, I'm sure you saw it, Ronnie, where like they're just like, please God, let me keep my job at the end of this time. Like, just blew a budget on pizza and bringing this guy in from who knows where to come and play. That was more my concern. It wasn't like, ooh, we love churches. Churches always fed us, and churches always paid. Like, I mean, like, I'll be real honest. Like you go to those small town church school, and I'm sure you're used to it. Like, those kids buy merch because nothing comes to town.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
and
honestly, Bartlesville's
really
like
that. I appreciate what you said. I think that's a really great attitude, because, it's weird that we make those distinct, because I know playing in church wasn't cool, in quotes, right? But, my brother and I grew up in the church, and we don't, we didn't hate the church. We're church goers. And so playing in church wasn't out of our natural habitat. And, those people that brought you out, I mean, they worked really hard, and they were putting a lot at stake, their reputation. I mean, these were people that had jobs, they were in ministry, they were putting up a lot of money and a lot of time. And it's like, man, to respect them and to do your best and to not treat them like they're second class citizens because they're a church or they're a youth. I mean, that to me is it wasn't right. It was uncalled for. And so I never wanted a youth pastor or somebody who's organizing something at the church to feel like we were just settling for their show, because we weren't, and we enjoyed it, So I think so I really appreciate what you just said, because that's so true. Thinking about what they're doing, they're working hard. How can we help? How can we honor them? They're honoring us. I think all that comes into place. Yeah.
Ronnie, that is so funny, because, like, as you know, this used to get discussed. Every freaking warehouse, it didn't matter who it was. I mean, it'd be POD. This was getting discussed. I've heard thousands of opinions on this. I mean, HM would write about it. CCM would write about it. What you just said, that's the first time I heard anybody say that. And that is really I don't say this lightly. I mean, that's a Christ-like response. I mean, it's compassionate to other people. It's respectful of what they think and what they're trying. Wow. Well, I'm impressed again with you.
And especially, Ronnie, for you in the 90s, like, if you weren't, I know at least here, the only thing that ever came to my dad's church was a Southern gospel thing that I'm like, well, this is going to be crap. I mean, and it wasn't like I was just like, oh man, these aren't, because they were all great people. It just wasn't something that fit for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure for you in the 90s and even like early 2000s, going to certain churches and playing, like, I always felt more comfortable if they didn't have the old attendance sign that shows like how many people were in Sunday school.
The one that looks like an acorn. Yeah. I always think that.
How many people brought their Bible? Like you want to talk about getting shamed. That is
attendance a year ago.
Yes. Like, right. I always felt a little better if those things weren't on the wall walking in. But like you were saying, you were doing a service for the church. You were doing a service for those people, and you honored them, and you did what you set out to do. Like, we always just wanted to set out to let the kids have a good time.
Yeah.
It wasn't complicated to us, because I don't think philosophically, we were struggling with that, and we didn't, and so that's real. And I know, I didn't have any problem with artists that were like, hey, I don't, whether it's whether it's a conflict with my beliefs or whether I just don't feel comfortable in these venues. I mean, that's fair. And they had a choice to not play those venues, and that's totally fine,
But therein for me, that some of the attraction lie in discussions like that, because I really did feel, I always tell people, I reached a point in my life where I wanted to think big thoughts and do important things, and like that's kind of what that is. I felt like we were having discussions that were relevant, that was relevant to what we were doing. On the absolute flip side of that, right, which is funny because you kind of like hit through a curveball, like that wasn't an answer that I thought you were going to, and then it was freaking amazing. What'd you think of the Warehouse? I mean, with all that said, and like this really eloquent answer about churches, what do you think about playing a dive like the Warehouse?
I mean, we loved it. I mean, honestly, I'm not just saying that because you guys are sitting there. I mean, there were very few venues we played that we didn't enjoy. And fond memories. I mean, we loved it, seriously. So it was just, we liked the variety, and we liked that different venues attracted different crowds, and that's enjoyable. Playing to different crowds,
What was our crowd like?
I don't remember that exactly. But.
Have you seen that meme, my friend, where it says something to the effect of, "Mom, I'm going to a show at church. It's going to be okay." And then it's like the guy diving off of the balcony into the
right.
That was kind of the Warehouse, I think.
Right, pretty much, yeah, pretty much. But no, it was great, and I think I'm grateful that you guys were doing it. I mean, there's a lot of respect there, a lot of hard work that went into it, and honestly, it was the reason why we were able to do what we did and travel around, the U.S. and beyond, right? It's because, you guys were devoted to it as much as we were devoted to it, so.
Oh, God, you wouldn't believe the staff people. It's really funny. I mean, we were 100% fans and still are. I mean, I've got people from the staff from, 25 years ago, right? I mean, like, can you talk to, you know what I mean? Like, can you talk to Upside Down Room or whatever? Like, wow. And it's just crazy. I mean, like, again, back to the No New Kind of Story book, I really do feel like that's almost a yearbook for us. I feel like when I look at that, it's like, these are my people. This is what we did. This was our time together.
I mean, yeah, I remember when I thumbed through it. It brings back a lot of like very like thick memories. You know what I mean? It was certainly a time. And it lasted quite a while for us. And so it's hard to imagine my 20s and 30s. That's when I think of my 20s and 30s. And if I'm, other than, my wife and my daughter and, just, the life that we had together, that's where my mind goes, because we were just, that's all we did. We made records and we played records and we toured records. And, it just had it was the major component of our lives, and so, what a time it was, it was a crazy.
It's funny that, like, I've told Chase this because he was, he's a little bit younger than us, slightly. But, like, when he was, like, his formative years were more in that time frame. So, it's funny that, like, I'm kind of discovering a lot of that. Like, Rage Against the Machine, for example. I'm like, man, those guys are freaking awesome. Like, they're great. Yeah. I didn't know this because at the time, I flat didn't care about anybody that was outside our scene. I didn't even know what was going on in the general market. I was just fully into, like, what we were doing and our people was doing and all that. And, now I'm just like, Radiohead. God, those guys are great.
Yeah, it's fun to discover things that for some reason passed you by back in the day, and now you discover them and you're like, hey, I found this new band that's 30 years old,
Well, see, Ronnie, the things that, like, I see because I heard of Joy Electric before I started hanging out with
I
you.
love how he says it like that's allegedly the pronunciation. Joy Electric.
Yeah, I've heard of you. I wasn't like that. My time in music started, a little bit later, but it kind of seems that in that world of like, you have your metalcore, hardcore, punk, there's always kind of that band very similar to like Joy Electric to pop up, kind of like Hello Goodbye. Like when I started listening, I was like, okay, so this was Tim's Hello Goodbye. Like we went to shows a few times that would be, like these screamo hardcore bands, and like there'd be like Hello Goodbye was like on their MySpace.
They're my craft work.
Oh, are they? That's kind of how I saw it. And so, hearing, I'm sure like back in the day, if remixes, I could see the Joy Electric remix thing. Like if you did like a whole remix album of all the Tooth and Nail bands, like, and I know you've done a couple of covers and a few things like that, like with one of your albums, but like that's kind of, maybe you were the trendsetter for that. Maybe you made it okay to be the nerdy guy with the synthesizer and...
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. That's what I was trying to say earlier. He wasn't the nerdy guy. I mean, this guy was on 150 the whole time.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you could have come out on stage with Zayo and done the same thing, and it wouldn't have been out of place. I mean, I was always like, man, Ronnie believes in this. Like, I mean, it wasn't like, hey, this is our cheesy, like, we're going to do blah, 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 and watch that. No. I mean, it was like, we're serious, we're into this, we're doing it, here we go.
Yeah.
Buckle up.
And that's probably a way that you probably turned people into fans that weren't even really looking for Joy Electric to be in their life.
Yeah, it was, it was such a novelty sound that we were doing, and we were really serious about it, though. So I think what you said is true. I think when people, whether they got to meet us or see us play, or, we were putting out a record and an EP a year, we were prolific too. So there's a lot of material coming out. And I think it was just, at some point, people's ears got attuned to it. And it was, through over time, it felt a little less like a novelty because they could see that we were so devoted to it, and we believed in it. And it was quirky. I mean, it was quirky, and we were. I like that aspect of it. So it's in hindsight, it's really interesting. It was a little out of place and out of time. It's funny that it's that sound from that era that we were doing. I mean, there's so many bands. I mean, it's so funny to hear it all now. And it's so commonplace now. And when you talk to younger people, I mean, they, when you see some of the artists they listen to now, and they wouldn't have blinked an eye 25 years ago what we were doing if it was now. But we were at such an odd time for what it was. But that's also what made us stick out. So you kind of give up one thing to gain another thing. And so I don't know, I'm still processing our history, right? It's kind of weird.
Here's another question that you've probably been asked 6 billion times that we used to talk about at every show and all that. But did you get crap from the general market about being Christian or whatever? I mean, there was a flip side to it? Like when you weren't in a church and you were in a club or something? I mean, was that rough?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, our lyrics, except for one album that we did, our lyrics were never overtly, they wouldn't have led you to know that about us. But, yeah, I think when people caught wind of, who we were, from a religious perspective, we never got treated really poorly for that. But I think, it probably from a commercial standpoint, maybe having some opportunities to cross over a little bit more, maybe it hurt us a little bit, because we also didn't want to be ashamed of our faith. And, we weren't going to thump people over the head with Bibles, but we also, we were okay with saying, we follow Christ, and, we're men of faith. And, so I don't know, I'm sure. I'm sure there were certain people that when they caught wind of our beliefs, it probably affected the way they were able to listen to the records. I would imagine that that would be true. And we definitely heard some things over the years, but yeah, I mean, whether that was widespread or not, God's in control. I don't know.
Yeah. You were going to ask something, and I stupidly stepped on your toes just then.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember what. I can't remember what the question was going to be.
It was probably good.
It was probably the best question on the whole podcast.
Well, so flash forward a little bit. Now you're a pastor. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I've been in ministry for a long time now because I'm an old man. But
yeah, we don't have the chops and the Caesar cut, man. Like I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. I got into ministry probably about 20 years ago, and it just slowly started. The Lord slowly just started opening doors and doors, and even while I was still doing a lot of music stuff. And the very short story of it is we relocated from California to Ohio, and I've planted a couple churches. And I'm currently a lead pastor of a church, and I just really got fully immersed into ministry. And so, my world now is, I'm a church planner. I'm a lead pastor. I write books. I'm part of a church planning network that we plant churches all around the U.S. And I do work with all that. So I do a lot of work with other pastors, do pastoral care for them. So, a really very different life than it was 25 years ago. Yeah.
With that said, would Ronnie from 25 years ago from Joy Electric thought this is where Ronnie the person would be in 25 years?
No, and I was one of those guys that the Lord brought me kicking and screaming into ministry. I was super resistant to it, and he just kept opening these doors, and I had these really kind-hearted brothers, these pastors that really invested in my life. And again, I wasn't even asking them. They were just taking an interest in me. And they were asking me some really hard questions about, where I was at with the Lord and what kind of place music had in my life, which wasn't a great place. And so the Lord used that to just kind of wake me up a little bit. And just, and before I knew it, I'm on a church staff, and I'm still recording and playing, and I'm doing all this stuff. And he just slowly, inch by inch, kind of brought me into, full-time ministry. So
was your first dive into ministry, was it through music, or was it kind of like exact opposite? Like, were you like a worship pastor, or was that like your gateway in, or did you like say, I want two separate things?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my first step in, believe it or not, was I was at a larger church, and they had lost their worship pastor, their long-standing worship pastor, and this church was more traditional. Okay, so think like a big worship band, but also like a choir, and also like all this stuff, and so. The pastor who I'd gotten close to, he hired me to actually just oversee the whole ministry. And so I was over the sound team, the AV team. They had 4 different worship leaders that I had to oversee. I just had to make sure that every week there was a service prepared and everybody was ready to go. And then I also led too, so I would do some of that. But I was just doing everything. So, but it was, yes, I came in through the music side of it all. And I did that for some years. And I eventually really got a heart for preaching and for church planning. I was never really a great worship leader. It just wasn't, I don't know, it's because I spent so many years doing my own music, and it was really hard for me, and I wasn't very good at it. And so I really prayed that the Lord would move me into, doing more preaching ministry, and he did. And I'm not a great preacher, but I'm much better at that than I am leading worship. So, yeah.
I bet you could kill it on "Lord, I Lift Your Name on High."
Yes. around here, what you're describing is what we call a blended service. Okay.
That's right. Totally.
Definitely contemporary service.
Depending on where you're at.
That's it.
So did what you were just saying, now that, because you've got all these things attached to your name now, like author and pastor and blah, blah, blah. I used to joke that, like, in the old days, like, From whatever band was really what their last name, like Scott from Plank Eye. Like, from Plank Eye was his last name, or Mike from MXPX, or Ronnie from Joy Electric. Like, did that, I mean, how is that? I mean, I don't want to use this word specter because it's not bad, but, well, like, is it a specter over Ronnie, what you're doing now? I mean, do you come into it with people who are like, this is Ronnie from Joy Electric, or how is that?
You know, that's an interesting question. I don't talk about it ever in ministry circles. And you know, it's really interesting how many people approach me in all the ministry stuff I do that talk about Tooth and Nail days and, oh man, I had these records, and it's really flabbergasting sometimes, you know, because it happens more than you would imagine. And I'm always kind of surprised by it. But in terms of my local congregation, I don't ever talk about it. And this is going to sound like I'm being funny, and I'm not being funny here, but, you know, it's really a tough thing to explain to a person that had no history with what I did musically. And they're hearing me preach now, and I'm their pastor. And then they run across like a video, like the monosynth video or something. And I would just rather not have to explain. Yeah, I would rather not have to explain that. And because that was a long time ago, and I was in my mid-20s, and there you go, right? But it's I don't want to confuse people, and I don't want to have to say, you know, it's almost, it creates a dissonance that I try to avoid. And inevitably, because we have this thing called the internet, everybody can find out anything. And what's so funny is that back in the day when we were doing all this stuff, we didn't know that this stuff would just live on forever, you know.
Ronnie, I can't stop thinking about some old man walking up to you being like, I found this on the YouTube. Why are you dancing around in a castle? Like, that's all I can think of.
Yeah,
and come to my attention.
And that happens. Oh my gosh. And I usually just go, when you're younger, you do a lot of crazy stuff. And I go, none of it was immoral. It was just silly. It was artistic. It was fun. I go, in a little weird. I said, so I hope you can get past that, and you can bump up another 25 years to the Ronnie of today, you know.
Listen, things were done, Ted, and that's all we can say. Like, that's
well. And you know what, Ronnie? We can go back to the discussions from 25 years ago, and here's the response. They just didn't get it.
No.
They don't get it.
Well, see, I met Ted Dibiase, the $1 Million Man from
man.
WWE at a Baptist convention for my dad. And, like, he's trying to be like a pastor, and I'm trying to find a $50 bill for him to put in my mouth after he body slams me. He's like, I'm a preacher now. And I'm like, buddy, you're throwing me on the ground putting a $100 bill.
Yeah.
Okay, Ryan, I know you're busy. So I don't want to take up all your time, but I do have one more question that I just thought of. He keeps getting such good answers, like it inspires other stuff. What, based on what you were just saying, because you just said that, like, and I knew this. I mean, back in the old days, you definitely weren't like a "Hey, come get saved" kind of band. It wasn't like the Supertones, where it's like, we're going to take it down now and talk about, blah blah blah.
Do that G-box.
But now, what you just said about you being a pastor, it's kind of the switch has been. I mean, does that make you rethink the old Joy Electric days? I mean, are you ever like, man, I should have said more, what? Usually, it's kind of the opposite, you know.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of reflection on that. I mean, I definitely would do a lot of things differently now. And you can't, maturity only comes with age and, sanctification, and you don't get to buy that, And so I think certainly, if I could go back with the mind I have today to when I was 25 years old, it would be a completely different scenario. And but I don't think it's as much that as it is just a general sense of contentedness with what we were doing. We worked really hard, but we were also we were always trying to prove ourselves. And there were a lot of times where we enjoyed a lot of it. And there was a lot of things that were really difficult that I think we were kind of running in the flesh a little bit too much. And I would go back and, if I had, again, you can't go back with the maturity that you lacked. But if I could go back today, I think I would enjoy it even more, because I think I would have been able to be a little more thankful for what we were doing and be able to just, enjoy what the Lord had given to us as a blessing, and then let that, I think, maybe flow out a little bit more to other people than it did. Rather than it, kind of being caught up. That whole tooth and nail thing was a scene. That was a culture that was established there, and it was competitive, and there was a lot involved in it. And again, if I could go back, I would just approach it so differently. And again, the Lord really preserved me and my bandmates, my brother. I mean, we're still married to the same women, and the Lord's been really kind in those ways. And so I'm really thankful for that He preserved us. He helped us a lot. But I definitely have some regrets for sure.
Honestly, Ronnie, I think you did it right. I mean, that's one of the honestly, I mean, I know this is going to sound like hyperbole. When my life's over, the stuff that I did at the warehouse is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 things that I feel like I've ever accomplished in my life. Yeah. And I mean, that was something that I literally wouldn't trade. I wouldn't trade that to be in 1977 and the Sex Pistols thing. I mean, right. I think what happened there, and the people that we met, and the music that you guys made, and the music that we enjoyed, and what it did for, I mean, I think it stands eternally. I think you did it right.
That's kind of you to say. I think that's an encouraging word. And I think, it's funny. I always tell people that, all the doors that the Lord has opened for me over the years have all been, based on relationships that I made, in that, at that time. And so, I mean, you can draw it's going to be a wobbly path, but it's definitely a path from, all the music stuff to what I'm doing now. And so, I mean, I really see it. You see it more clearly with time, right? And when you look back on your life and how God just is weaving these things together. And He really did that. I don't know that we would be doing what we're doing now had all of that not happened, and whether that was, God is always preparing us for what's next. And that in a lot of ways was just a rehearsal for what I'm doing today. And that's not to discount what we did at all. It was a season. It was a long season, and it was a growing season, and I'm still growing, but He used it. And to hear you say that means a lot. So thanks for saying that, brother.
Dude, I mean that from every fiber of my being. Seriously.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ronnie. We love you. God bless you. Keep being relevant.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ronnie.
All right, brother.
All right. That's going to be our... Ronnie, thank you so much for making episode 13 fun. We had a way more in-depth, more. He made a lot of great points. He talked about some things I wasn't even expecting.
Yeah, no joke.
It was a good time. So, thanks for watching. We'll be back. I'm not quite sure who we've got in the works for the next one.
I don't know.
We'll pull something out. We'll pull something out. We got people on the ground in the Pacific Northwest right now, so maybe they can.
We got boots on the ground.
Yeah, we can find it. We can find somebody up there.
Actually, with us, they're probably Birkenstocks. I think.
Is that what he's rocking right now?
Oh yeah, he's a hippie.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, for sure.
Man.
It's not Doc Martens.
Yeah, they're not back in the day when the grunge and the Doc Martens. So thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow us, warehousepod.com, warehousepod for all of our social medias. Check out Tim. Thanks again, Kane, for letting us come over here and shoot and everything that you do for us. So until next time, I guess we're out. All right.
Heck yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that was really